Hello and welcome to part 4 of Appendix C and Stevens's Matrices, Vectors, and 3D Math, a game programming approach with MATLAB. And here we're going to grab a couple of files from the code repository found on the textbook website under the very last group here, the zipped files under Appendix C, a quick guide to MATLAB. Alright, so in part 4 of this Appendix C, we're going to talk about input and output with the command window. Basically, when a program is running, how can it grab input from the user that can be typed in through the command window, and how can it send information back out. All right. Okay, so there's a couple of files that I want you to grab. The first one is example input command window, and then the other one in that same zipped folder is example output command window. So there's an input and an output. Alright, so once you get those open, I want you to run this first one, example input command window. I run it. What is your name? My name is Scott. How many iterations? I'm not sure what that's asking, but I'll say 5. And press enter to continue. Hello, Scott. It said hello, Scott 5 times, so that's what that iterations was indicating. Okay, so how did I do this? The first thing I did, and by the way, it's easier if you set up your desktop, your window here, so that the command window is adjacent to the code, right? You don't want it nested in there in a tabbed form or down below. It just works out really nice over here. Okay, so how did I do it? The first thing I did was I cleared the command window. That's how I start a lot of my programs. And then how did I get that name? It asked me for my name, and I was able to type it in over here. That's with the command called input. Right? The input command expects you to type something into the command window. What I type in there is going to be called name. And so the input command goes input, parentheses, and then the message to the command window. What is your name? Single quotes, comma. And what this is telling me, the default is a numeric value. But I don't want a numeric value. I'm expecting a string. That way I can type in Scott and not get an error. If I had typed in something like 7, it would actually be fine. It would just treat it like a string. And then N will be input, how many iterations. So this will get sent to the command window, how many iterations. Now when the default is a numerical value. So you don't have to put in, you could put comma N. I think. I'm not sure what the official descriptor is for a numerical value or a float. But the default is that, so it's okay to not put anything in there. Okay, and so this input, press enter to continue, right? It's basically just waiting for something, right? You don't have to, it's not given a value. You can actually press anything to continue, right? And then it does this little loop, a loop that goes from 1 to n, which is how many times you're going to go through the iterations as obtained from the command window, from the user. And then it'll display the name. And basically this fprintf, that's very much like display or DISP, except that there's no new line. So I get the hello and then immediately followed by display. Now display creates a new line afterwards. That's why I get the hello and then the space Scott, then a new line. Display automatically has the new line in there. fprintf does not. Right? So there you go. Input from the command window. You can put in string, such as your name, and you can put in a number such as 5. You could have also done, there's also, you could have put in my name is 7. It's fine with that. And how many iterations? I'll go 2 pi, 2 times pi. All right, so it's pretty flexible with what you can put in there. It's an unusual name, but it'll accept it and treat it like a string. And the iterations, 2 pi, that's going to be 6 something. And so it did it 6 times, and then it's just went up to n and stopped. All right. Okay, so that's input. How about some output? And what I'll do first here, let's run this first. Run it. And it's a little it's a little tight over there. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to dock it within, basically tab it. So I'm going to grab that blue thing and put it up here as a tab. So there's the output to the command window. Here's the code. It's a little easier to see the code this way. So we're grabbing example output command window.m. And this is how to send some output, and typeset it appropriately. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to define this variable x1 that'll be pi. All right, which oddly enough in MATLAB, pi is just pi. Right? No e. It's not a piece of pi. It's pi, the number. And then m. This is a 2 by 2 matrix. Right. And then what we're going to do here, and I think it's probably worth referencing the book here for a second. When you go to the output, it's on page 203 here. Basically, there's a few ways to output. The display command, you can send simple strings or single variable values to the command window, and then you get a new line. And then sprintf can be used to create complicated strings that include numerical values, and then you can use display to print those texts. But what you can do instead is just fprintf, which does that sequence together. Instead of creating a text with sprintf and then displaying it, you can just use this fprintf. Right. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do this. So what I've done here is I have a variable which is a single number, a variable which is actually a matrix, and then a string which will contain some variable information. So sprintf, and use the parentheses, this is the text part, x1 equals, right? I have the single quote, x1 equals, and this is the key part, %1.5f. That means it is expecting a float, and it will display it to 5 decimal places, and then it'll do a new line. And what is the float that it will display? Well, you end the text with the single quote, comma, it will display x1. So it's going to display pi to 5 decimal places. All right, and if you go over here, that's exactly what it did. All right. Oh, but it actually didn't do it yet because I didn't call it. I just created the text. I actually display it or send it to the command window. First here, the display command. So this is just a straight up string that I'm sending directly to the command window. That's this first line right here. Right. And then I'm going to display that text that I created right here. That's the x1 equals, and this is where it will create the 5 decimal approximation to pi. Right? And so that gives me this part. You can also use display to say print a matrix, display M. So that's a 2 by 2 matrix M. You can use display, no quotes, and it prints it right out. There's that matrix M. Notice it didn't do M equals, it just spit it right out to the command window. And then you can sort of combine this, instead of creating text with sprintf and then displaying it, you can do all this stuff with fprint. Right? And it can be used like the display command. In this case, all I've done was display some simple text. But you do need this \n to get a new line. The display automatically gives you the new line. But it's also great for printing numbers as strings, so including text with numbers in there. So for example, here's what I have. I'm going to get a new line, and then this is all text, right? Because I'm in that single quotes. If x equals, and right here, it's expecting a numerical value, a float, and it's going to express it. It's going to print it out to 5 decimal places. And then there's some more text, and then another float that it will print out to 2 decimal places, right? And the first one will be x1, and then the second one will be the sign of x1. So you'll print out, so you can sort of nest these numerical values for the variables within sentences or text. And so that's what was created here. Here, fprintf was used just like the display command. You do need the \/ for a new line, but it's great for doing things like this sentence here. Right? I have if x equals, there's that float to 5 decimals. There's the second float to 2 decimals. So it's very handy, especially it helps you sort of keep track of what you're doing when you're coding, so you can sort of send things to the command window and format them in such a way that it's not too cryptic. So that's the idea. We have display for straight, quick, fast output of either strings or numerical values. You can't combine them, or you can combine them with fprintf. And again, you'll never remember the syntax to this, so make sure you know that there are a couple of files in that repository that show you how to send output to the command window and how to get input from the command window. Alright, that wraps it up, and we'll see you in the next section, which will be input and output from the figure window. Bye.